Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. And today we are speaking with Andrea Flack-Wetherald. Andrea is a social worker turned comedian, best-selling author of the book, The Funny Thing About Forgiveness, What Every Leader Needs to Know About Improv Culture, and the world's least favorite F word, and speaker. She teaches mindful improv thinking, a combination of mindfulness practice and skills from improvised comedy. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited to talk with you today.
Well, folks, we are excited to have all of you listening today, and we will be speaking about having brave conversations as a leader, something that's needed. You do need courage for a lot of conversations that we have. But before we get into that content, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so you mentioned social worker turned comedian. My job as a social worker was on a research study that was looking at behavior change. Specifically, it was looking at behavior change related to addiction and the situations where a doctor might say, if you don't quit smoking, you're going to die. And we know that even when we have these ultimatums with sky high consequences, it doesn't necessarily improve outcomes of people's ability to actually follow through on this change. And so the purpose of the study was to figure out, well, what does help? How do we come alongside someone that's wanting to make a change? And I had the opportunity to be trained by some of the best teachers in the country and something called motivational interviewing, which is essentially a model of intervention developed by social scientists looking at how do we come alongside someone who wants to make a change and help them be more successful, measured in two ways. One is that an attempt to change is actually embarked upon. And number two is that the length of time they spend in the stage of change called maintenance is increased. And I share all of this because this has become something that is still a part of my work today. And this idea of really embracing what's called the trans-theoretical model of understanding there are lots of buckets along the way when we're trying to make a change in our lives. And each of them is serving us in some way. Each of them has a job to do. And so embracing this idea of what people are actually going through when they try to make a behavior change, and better understanding how to actually partner with them where they are and draw out their own internal motivation to change using good questions, not lecturing, not threatening, not ultimatums, but asking questions designed to figure out what motivates this person, what's going on for them, and then help them get to the change that they want to make. Then it was about smoking cessation. Now it's about brave conversations and helping people get to a place where they feel more confident to consistently speak up for themselves or speak up for a change that needs to happen, a boundary that they want to set. And this could be the case perhaps in a relationship in life or at work. But the goal of my behavior change conversations now is essentially building more peace, building resilient trust. This is the type of culture that can win together, a culture that is rooted in resilient trust. So that's the nature of my work now. And I am super grateful to have this foundation of motivational interviewing from my time as a social worker and all of these really gorgeous, super fun things that I picked up as an improviser to kind of feed into the system that's really unique and really approachable for hopefully connecting with people and making a difference.
Now, I love that. That's just wonderful. I was having a conversation with my wife just last night about the reason why we say we want something and and why we don't get there, right? I want to do this, and then time happens and it just never happens. And so sometimes a lot of that courageous or brave conversations is, hey, do you really want this?
Mm-hmm.
What is it exactly that you want? And so I love how you are approaching that. And we do need to start having those conversations. So what is the purpose of a brave conversation? Because we conversate all day long.
Mm-hmm.
We have conversation, but hardly any of them really get down to the root of the matter.
Yes, exactly. So the purpose of brave conversations is resilient trust. So this means our ability to fail in front of each other and come out on the other side realizing it is safe to be imperfect. I am enough. This person is more than this one thing about them. Maybe it's not, there's no erasure. There's this yes, and there's this foundational improv concept of acceptance and then building on top of it. So it's this understanding that if we're going to do something brave, we're going to fail in front of each other. It's just a guarantee. And so if we want to have real impact in the world, if we want to have a truly, like, let's use your example of marriage, if we want to have a truly connected marriage, it's going to require some vulnerability. We're not going to get where we want to be with this scene partner by avoiding the conversations that, we're worried will stir up maybe some tricky feelings. And so the goal of a brave conversation is to build that resilient trust, build that ability to be who you really are, understanding that whatever it is that we want to build, if we want to build something that we're proud of, not just something we can tolerate, we're going to mess it up along the way. Sometimes it's not a risk, it's a guarantee of brave living. And so when we get purposeful and intentional about having these conversations and really showing up for ourselves or showing up for someone else, the result is the type of trust that allows us to actually pitch real ideas, actually build something together that's brave or new or innovative.
I love that. As you're talking, I'm looking at a scenario with me and my wife, which she's a whole lot braver than I am at times, and she'll pose these questions that are very not just thought provoking, but internal looking. And so
Yeah.
I really appreciate that about my wife. Sometimes in these tough conversations or brave conversations that we need to have, active listening must be enacted. Sometimes she'll say, "Can you put that phone down?" Right? Because it really does require that. So what role does active listening have in these conversations?
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't need me to tell you that listening is important. We know that listening is important already. And I think one of the things for me that has become really important when this question comes up, and it does often, is to shift the conversation away from lecturing people again about how important listening is, to shift away from bullet pointing. This is what active listening is. Put your phone down. You should put your phone down. We know these things already. My question is, why don't we do them? What is it that's making it hard for us to listen well? And the answer is that we're not mindful. This is the piece that I think is missing in the conversations that we have about listening, is that what's pulling us away from the moment, that's what not listening is being pulled away from the moment. And what's doing that is anxiety, shame, worry, resentment, suspicion, lack of trust in some way. Something is pulling us out of this moment. That is what I am interested in talking about. And that's kind of the core of my book. And the reason that I wrote a book about forgiveness is that when we are proactive about forgiveness, and I get into this in the book, that forgiveness is not just reserved for the most painful and traumatic things we've ever been through. In fact, sometimes unpacking the lower stakes things can have a really high ROI in our ability to just be present in this moment. I define forgiveness as noticing that you're not feeling good about something, noticing that you're having a negative emotion like this, asking yourself, what is this about? Noticing what is the limiting belief that I started telling myself. I'm being pulled out of this moment, so I'm not listening to what's happening right now, because in my brain somewhere, something else is saying, this is urgent. There's danger, in some way, your freedom, growth, joy, expansion, provision of needs, your ability to be safe and be good and thrive is threatened. That's what is happening to you, really. I mean, I think this is cool to think about. Like, are you getting this so far? Since I can't see your face, I'm like wanting to know if you're resonating with this right now. Is this making sense to you?
Oh yeah, this is like on point. This is it. Mindfulness and the ability for something to pull you out of a situation, that's powerful.
It is powerful. And this is why I want to encourage people to practice mindfulness, to understand that this is not about you needing to sit on a pillow and go, I mean, if that helps you, good, do it. Sometimes I do that too. But I think that there is this fear, at least in the culture that I come from, around even the word mindfulness, because it sounds unfamiliar and it sounds uncomfortable. And the reality is that mindfulness can be paired with meditation. It can be paired with all kinds of other practices, and it's gorgeous and good and helpful in those contexts also. But really what we're talking about is your ability to be present in this moment. Your ability to be present right now, listening to how the scene is unfolding right now. Your ability to stay committed to this scene partner. You know what I mean? Like, stay committed and present in this moment. That's what we're talking about. So the more that you're willing to practice mindfulness and just build up those skills when the stakes are low, this is the benefit of taking 5 minutes in the morning to practice a body scan and to notice, like, where am I feeling pain in my body? What do I need? Am I thirsty? Do I need to pee? What's happening for me right now? What do I need in order to take care of myself? There are benefits of that in terms of your physical health, but there's also this major benefit of that you are building these muscles to just notice what's happening in this moment, to pull yourself back into this moment. That will serve you so well in brave conversations. Your simple ability to not need to walk in with a whole script, your ability to just simply walk in with one offering. This is how I felt when this happened. What's going on for you? What do you think about that? And then shut up and let them talk. That's what it is right there.
Yeah, no, beautifully stated and set up for anyone to just envision this. In the church, we talk about self-control, right? And a lot of it is, guided by the Holy Spirit, but there's an active part from our side. And, when you don't enact mindfulness, you're proving the lack of self-control.
Yeah. And I think that when this happens in leadership capacities, the result is that people tend to say, that's not a good leader. That's a bad leader. That person never should have been promoted to that role. And one of the things that I suggest in the book is that maybe it's less helpful to have that conversation of who's cut out to be a leader, who's a good leader and who's not a good leader. And to realize that there's not really these two kinds of people, someone who can lead and someone who can't. What there really is someone who in this moment is present, is open, is listening, and someone who in this moment is closed off. And so you're talking about the Holy Spirit. I don't know if you primarily have people of faith, Christian faith, who resonate with that term, but however you define that, the spirit of love that inspires you to be your best self when you're feeling vulnerable. If you are pinched off from that because you're angry, because whatever, you're feeling resentful, maybe it's about this, maybe it's about something that just happened, but whatever, you've pinched yourself off from that. You just cannot think of that next right thing to say. What's going to happen is that you're just reacting. You're perpetuating more of what you don't want in that conversation. And this is the whole thing. I use this analogy because I heard about it. I use the Calm app, which I love. And so there's this story, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but of a man who goes to a well and he's so thirsty. And, he pulls up this bucket of water and he's just grabbing at it. He's so thirsty. And he's like, there's no water staying in my hands, but I'm grabbing, ferociously. Of course, that's not the way to get a drink, though. You have to soften your grip. You have to open your hands. And that's how you can receive the thing that you need. It's the same way for brave conversations when you're feeling like, I just can't think of that next right thing. I don't know what to say. And then I beat myself up. And on my drive home, then I think of everything. Why do you think that might be? Why do you think that in the middle of the night, you can think of the thing that you wish that you had said? You're calm. You're calm. And now your mind can think of like, this. Now you can hear that inspiration from divine love, God beyond the God I can name. That's why, because when you're calm, you can receive that inspiration. So my whole thing is practice mindfulness. The more you do that, the more you will be able in that moment, in that brave conversation, to be like, okay, what is my scene partner saying to me right now? What might they see that I don't see? That idea that I just said, I call curiosity over judgment. That's one of the core 5 improv skills that I teach anywhere folks will listen, for applying from the stage into brave conversations. So that ability to choose curiosity instead of judgment. It's not anybody's first instinct. It's not my first instinct even, but it's chosen curiosity. It's your willingness to interrupt those judgmental thoughts of what kind of person I'm dealing with or what they probably think about me. and breathe and ask, what else might be going on here? And then the more you just learn to do that and you hold space for silence and you realize that silence is not an emergency, the more you're softening your grip and you'll be able to think of that next right thing.
That is wonderful, especially as you had posed earlier. It's easy in a leadership structure to, and I've been guilty of that throughout my lifetime. This person should have never been there. What in the world? How would they? And you have to be mindful that you don't fall into those judgmental situations in your life, because even that closes you off, right? And so you have to be very cautious as a leader, or even as a follower, spectator, supporter role, to get into those conversations, because they
Mm-hmm.
really do not build, they actually break down. So as leaders, you know how can I, as a leader, number one, I have to become mindful myself, right? But how can I, as a leader, create a safe, mindful environment for open dialogue? This is something that we have to continuously work on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that question. I just recently gave a talk on that very subject, actually. So, when we talk about safety, when we talk about creating a mindful environment, we're really talking about trust. So, not to come back to it over and over, but resilient trust. I'm going to repeat that phrase again. That's really what we're talking about, is building resilient trust. And there's several things that leaders can do in order to build that. Firstly, have a plan that is clear, known, and repeated for how feedback will be given, and stick to that plan. Don't ever say the words again, my door is always open. Like, just don't ever say them again. No, it's not. If it is, close it. That's a recipe for disaster. Any old time someone has something that they want to say is not the time that you are best positioned to listen to it. That expression is a cop out. It's basically saying it's hard to make a plan and stick to it for how we can give feedback productively. So I'm just going to allow myself to repeat these words to make it seem like I'm so open. I care about your ideas. If you do, make a plan, make a real plan for how people can give you feedback that is actionable and sincere, and how you can receive it and act on it. Secondly, model what it looks like to receive feedback graciously. That means express gratitude. And one of the things that I get into in the book with really incorporating, I've talked a lot about mindfulness in this conversation, which is great. It's so important. I haven't talked a lot about improv skills, which is also fine, because read the book, folks. but But this idea of gift orientation is another major component of improv. It's a core improv skill that you only add something to the scene if it's a gift. And whatever is happening in the scene, if you're the one that's being given a gift, you choose to receive it that way, even if it doesn't feel that way. And sometimes it doesn't, because sometimes you feel like it was fine. And then here comes this piece of information from somebody else, and it doesn't feel like a gift. And the other thing is, people who have not had the benefit of being trained in presenting their feedback and having these brave conversations, honoring themselves even as they honor their scene partners, if they're not having this shared language, which is like the sole goal of my work, then sometimes the way that they present their feedback to you does not feel like a gift. But so part of your job as a leader is to model that moment. How do you receive that feedback? And my deep desire is for people to respond with gratitude, because even if it's stingy, even if they could have delivered it differently, the best thing that you can do is thank them for their willingness to say it to you, because that was an option. They had another option, which was quitting, which was scrolling through Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever to find a different job, or worse than that, not doing either of those things and just quietly collecting a paycheck and becoming toxic and poisoning the water hole day in and day out. They chose to say a thing to you, express gratitude. There's time later. We can get into feedback if the way that they did it was disrespectful or whatever, but model gratitude about feedback. Model gratitude about feedback. And then, follow through. So it's the gratitude and it's the follow through on what can be done differently. So number 2 is like modeling what that looks like. Thirdly, raise the bar of expectations when it comes to peer-to-peer conflict. And, when I was speaking at a client recently, they were expressing that it had felt challenging for them to do that because post-pandemic, there had been a lot of attrition in their workforce. And it kind of felt like, well, we understand why there are these squabbles and this lack of trust because folks are getting to know each other. We're in the storming phase. That's fine if you're familiar with that forming, storming, norming, performing. I think I got that in the right order. I understand that. Great job having empathy. At the same time, we can expect people to storm with integrity, right? So raise the bar for what the expectations are. This is not a place where we gossip. We do not tear each other down at the water cooler. That is not how we operate here. There's no rabble rousing. That's just not what we're going to do here. We expect integrity, especially during moments of disagreement. And part of this is really, and I just can't stress this enough, truly embracing the value of disagreement. Divergent perspectives create better products. Divergent perspectives create better products. I've never said it quite like that, but I'm preaching it now. I mean, we have got to understand that disagreement is a beautiful moment. Conflict is the birthplace of trust. And so when this happens, we are being given an opportunity to prove to each other that we respect each other, to prove to each other that we actually care about belonging. We didn't just slap up a poster because it was trending on LinkedIn. If we really want a culture where we care about each other, this is the moment to prove that to each other. Disagreement is a beautiful opportunity. And so raise the bar, make sure people understand this is what the expectation is. And then lastly, I just really encourage people, provide support in the form of training. And of course, this is not to just plug my own self, but I mean, even if it's not me, make sure that people understand how, because we don't really teach this in school. We teach reading and writing and public speaking. We don't teach listening. We don't teach that. People often are just unaware of the habits that they have. This is what I mean about these behavior changes. People don't even really notice it yet. And so if we haven't really provided support in the form of understanding what the expectations are and how to follow through on them, people aren't going to get it right. So make sure that people are clear on what the expectations are. And then I definitely encourage people to, provide coaching, provide accountability, make sure that you're following through on your end.
All 5 great suggestions there. Thank you for that. One of them really hit me, and I can validate that in those times of turmoil, those times of friction, that and it may seem chaotic, trust really, really does come from those moments. I had a moment with my wife back in 2017 when it was very, it was like that. It was like we were in the fire, right? But out of that came such a level, and you say raising the bar, trust went just skyrocketing because there were a lot of tough conversations. There was a lot of clearing. There was a lot of listening. You talk of all those elements that you have been mentioning were involved in that time period. And there is truly no conversation that we cannot have now because, we went through the worst. And so anything compared to that is like this, right? Compare.
And to anchor it back to like a work perspective, when we go through seasons of change, which we all have, in a post-pandemic world, these are times that it's expected that there's going to be some funky feelings, and so be proactive about it. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your team. Sometimes people talk to me after I speak, like they owe me an explanation for the drama and like they need to provide these justifications. And I'm like, listen, that is normal. It is normal human behavior to feel a lack of ease right now as an adult. I mean, for Pete's sakes, if you look at the broader picture of what we have all lived through, watching our country just, it feels like rip each other at the seams. Anything that's real or vulnerable about us can be politicized and then used against us. Like, it is like we have completely forgotten at all how to have integrity in the presence of disagreement. But lo and behold, if we're going to be our authentic selves, then we're opening ourselves up to where there could be some feedback. There could be some sort of counter opinion. And so we're all like, I don't want that. Let me just not be my real self. Let me just like keep it superficial and whatever, but that doesn't feel good. And that's not how you get people's best ideas. So to me, it's just like, let's accept, let's acknowledge the emotional climate of our time and help do some course correcting. Like my evil secret plan here is that I want to train as many people as I can for how to have really healthy conversations at work that deeply impact their ability to collaborate with the people around them. But then what happens is that they go use those same skills in their neighborhoods. They go use those same skills at church, with their in-laws, with their spouse, with their children, at their kids' schools. And that slowly this begins to be peace building behavior in our world, because these same skills, that help improv succeed on stage, help us off stage, because life is improv. This whole thing is made up. And that's why these skills are so important to learn, because way too often we're bringing scripts to an improv party. And it's like, we need to learn improv skills. But then when we learn these skills and we practice them at work, where there is this sense of like expectation of professionalism, there is this sense of like expectation of decorum in a way that maybe there's not when you're just at home or at the Thanksgiving table or whatever. We take all these liberties with our family to not respect their perspective or whatever, the way that we feel like we have to at work. So to me, I'm like, if we can learn these skills at work, think about the difference that we could make in the world by taking these skills out of the office.
Absolutely. And speaking about the many emotions that may arise through this process, how can leaders manage them? Because it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are just a wide variety of things that can happen, because no two brave conversations are the same. And one thing that I had thought that I want to make sure to express is that these skills that I teach and the method that I teach of mindful improv methodology, the idea of it is to keep things from ever ballooning into something that's a huge theatrical production. The idea is that before all of that momentum gets built up, we've gotten out ahead of it. We've spoken up for ourselves. We've set the boundary that we needed to set, whatever it is, before it even gets to that point. But nobody's perfect. Let's say things are happening and there is, this high degree of emotion. The first thing that I want to encourage people to remember is that there is no time scarcity anxiety. What do I mean by that? Sometimes emotion gets heightened in a brave conversation because we feel like this is our one opportunity to say what needs to be said. And in improv, we have this thing called a scene edit. So what this means is that an improviser will kind of run across the front of a stage in front of the people that were just performing, and that ends that scene, and the stage empties, and then new people come out and start a new scene. And we kind of build on top of that. And all these ideas are building on top of it. Nothing is forgotten. We can always come back to those same characters and ideas later in the show and build upon them when we have more information or fresh inspiration. So editing the scene is not the same thing as being like, we're not going to talk about this anymore. That's not what it is. But it is just this understanding of like, maybe this has built as much as it can build for now, and we need to come back to it later. I have become a big fan of encouraging people to end a conversation when it's not productive anymore. That's an unnatural thing. We think that sounds intuitive, but we don't do it. We let things drag on because we said that we would have a 30-minute meeting or a 15-minute meeting. Maybe it needed to be a 45-second meeting. Maybe all that could possibly happen right now was the first initiation of, I'm upset and I need to talk about it. And you saying, thank you so much for telling me that. I care so much about you and so much about what you have to say to me that I actually honestly need to tell you that I can't do that right now because I'm headed into this other thing and I can't give you my full attention, and I want to. Let me put it on the calendar. We will have lattes. We will have margaritas, whatever the context is. We will talk about this, and you follow through on that. My whole thing is end the scene when it needs to be ended and then bring it back when it needs to be brought back. So that is, I think, one of the best ways to hold space for truly honoring emotion. I don't know if this needs to be said to your audience, but I also really encourage people to reframe the concept of professionalism. I once had a leader tell me that he doesn't know what to do when people cry in front of him because it's unprofessional and he just doesn't know how to handle it. And I said, well, what makes it unprofessional? He did not have an answer. And I said, is there a chance that what professionalism really is showing up and putting your all into perpetuating forward whatever the goal of your company or team or organization or nonprofit or whatever is? What if that's what it means to be professional? I am here. I am mentally, not just physically here. I am mentally fully here. And I am committed to moving this forward. I am committed to honoring these people and this mission. If that's professional, who the crap cares if somebody cries? Like, maybe that person helped a whole bunch.
That is powerful because I have heard that before. I learned that in those times is where I was able to show how much I cared. And so, I embraced it, but there are so many others that feel that that's not appropriate. And I'm always thinking, well, when did you stop being human? because because it's part of our nature, right? We do that. Emotions come out, and sometimes they come out wet. And here it goes, right? And that's okay. And now you talked about follow up as part of the 5 things. Leaders understand that there is power in the follow up. So, what actions should follow these brave conversations from the leader standpoint?
Well, I've already mentioned gratitude and follow through. Those really are excellent next steps. I encourage gratitude throughout the conversation as it feels sincere, just to be clear. I'm not interested in asking people to, say stuff that's not real. The whole point of this is be real. I really like to encourage people to send a follow-up thank you note. And it can be handwritten if that makes sense in your context, but a text will be fine. An email will be fine. Reason being, it's easy for something to go better than we thought it would go in the moment. And then we walk away, and then here come the fear gremlins. Maybe that didn't go as well as I thought. Remember that one awkward moment? Oops, I realized I had broccoli stuck in my teeth. Now it was a disaster. Like, there's just weird human person stuff that happens, and then instead of realizing, hey, we were both so brave in front of each other, the story that we're projecting in our heads is there was that one moment that was really awkward, or we start replaying, when I tried to answer that question, I didn't really say everything that I meant. I forgot this one thing, or do you know what I mean? We get stuck on this thing that wasn't completely perfect. And then we start worrying. That's very normal. That is very normal. And so because we know that happens, that's a really good time to just send a quick note. Hey, thank you so much for showing up today. It'd have been really easy to not sit and do that. And I really appreciate that you did that. I'm looking forward to our next conversation. We'll get it on the calendar. Or if you haven't already, sometimes, depending on the situation, sometimes it makes sense to be like, let's get it on the calendar now. But I also encourage people to not try to force so much plan on something that you're not leaving room for the Holy Ghost. That's what we say where I come from. But I say it sort of jokingly with clients, because what I mean by that is like, notice what does the scene need right now. If it's too much planning to be like, let's get it on the calendar right now, and that puts too much pressure on it, don't do that just because you put a box on your checklist. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm so for infrastructure, but it's this yes and infrastructure. It's this leave room for improv. It's this notice what is needed right now. That is so much more important than checking boxes. What is needed right now? That's how we find a way forward with our scene partner. So after the brave conversation, make sure to reach out, fortify that trust. Remember that they're probably feeling shaky. Maybe you're feeling a little bit shaky. So follow up and then follow through. And so make sure, it's just so important, because however well that conversation goes, it does not matter if you allow yourself to say, I'm just so busy. It's just because I'm so busy. They understand. I have like 6 kids and it's just so busy. And like, I hear leaders do this all the time. And it's like, listen, either you have the bandwidth to honor your scene partners or you don't. Sometimes the thing that needs to happen is you to exit. either change your role or find a different job or something. But it's like, you have to be able to follow through. If you can't follow through, if you can't work the behavior change steps in order to make sure that you are consistently following through, you are eroding trust. You are in your way. You are in everyone's way. And I know that sounds so hurtful. I don't mean for it to be hurtful, but I mean for it to be a reality check that the brave conversation is only as powerful as the follow through. You have to be about what you said you would be about. And so this is where it really comes into seeking out accountability. If you know that follow through isn't your strength, it's an unbelievable number of leaders who tell me that the follow through isn't their strength. And I'm like, you're cutting yourself off at the legs then, because your ability to have a real impact, your ability for your people to actually build something that makes a difference in the world is 100% gone if you're not following through. We need that type of trust that can only come from that type of consistency. So get accountability. If you're thinking in your head, oh no, she said I probably need to leave my job as a leader. Heart, here's what I hope you're taking away from that. Feel the level of motivation. Feel the level of motivation, because it is true that if you're not following through, that you are holding yourself back and your team back. That is true. It's also true that you can change. It's also true that you can. These are like little bitty behaviors. It's not something that's necessarily earth shattering. You wouldn't believe the number of times I'm in a meeting with someone and they say, oh, you know what, we should do this. And I get out my phone and I say, now I got to cover it up because it'll actually do it. Hey, Siri, remind me tomorrow at 9 a.m. to email so-and-so. And I guarantee you, okay, I covered it up in time. I was like, she's going to do it. And it's like this novel. You're like, that's a good idea. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's existed for a while. Like we have technology that can help us be better. It's just using the tools, you know?
So I'm over here cracking up because there are so many things at our disposal, but we fail to just even recognize them. But as you mentioned, that follow through, that's the key to any leader being effective at anything they say. That's where you prove that what you said you actually believe.
And
And
this is the
so
whole, I don't mean to cut you off, but to me, I just want to take this even one step further and say, the next question is, why is that hard? Because where I fear I may have left people in my last answer is shame. And that's not ever what I want to put into the world. I am not interested in putting shame into the world. The reality is that you struggle with follow through because of a reason that goes deeper than you probably realize. And one of the things that has been just a total gift to me, just such a gift of bringing together social work mindfulness with improv skills, is this understanding that who we are on the inside is manifesting in our daily behaviors on the outside. And so we can beat ourselves to death about why we're not doing this. And, oh, I'm stupid. Beat ourselves up. That does not get you closer to consistency. What does get you closer to consistency is really getting in there and being like, why is this hard for me? And you wouldn't believe the things. On the occasion, it's a smaller handful of people that I do this with, but I started recently doing one-on-one personal retreat days with leaders. And I love to do it in nature. I love to be in nature as often as I can. So we meet on a trailhead and we really get into it. We've had a focus finding call beforehand, and we really get into what is the thing that needs to be addressed. And so often the reason that we're not following through is this deep internal belief that it doesn't matter anyway. You know, this fear of like, if I say this, if I say the real thing that needs to be said, it's going to cause this relationship to go away. I have had people bring up their parents' divorce when they were 7 years old. I have had people bring up instances of assault. I have had people, remember some really painful things. And it's not always deep, deep trauma. Sometimes it really is like forgiving their worst boss, a poor template of leadership from the past, to where they've just sort of normalized this is what it is to be a boss, or this is what it is to be at work or whatever. But it's this forgiveness piece. It's this forgiveness piece that increases that consistency. And so if someone is listening to this, I would love to do a one-to-one retreat day, but if that's not in your budget right now, read the book. I'm telling you, like, you are going to be surprised by how many forgiveness opportunities are going to free up some major mental real estate for you to be more consistent and have more joy. You are more capable than you realize of building the type of consistency that you wish you had.
I truly believe that. And great point there. And talking about things that you're doing, what do you have coming up, and how can the folks get a hold of you if they want one of those retreats or they want you to come and speak to them? I'm definitely going to put the link to all that you have on the show notes so that they can get a hold of that, your book and stuff. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, what's coming up this year are more speaking engagements where I come in and share these types of ideas. And then, if the schedule allows, we play improv games together afterwards, which I really love doing because of something called experiential learning. So, it's just a fact that when you get out of your seat and you practice the skills, you retain more information and you really learn better. And so, improv gives us the opportunity to practice being in the present moment, to practice choosing curiosity instead of judgment, to practice maintaining faith after failure, which I've never said it right like that, but I love that a whole lot, and I'm probably going to make t-shirts. So that's kind of mostly what's coming down the pike, is this type of speaking and then workshop, more retreats. I love doing the retreats. I'm working on a couple books that won't be out this year, but will be out in the future. And if people want to be in touch with me, the best thing to do would be to join the Mindful Improv community. It's free. And I can send you the link so people can join. You can also just reach out to me, Andrea at andbeyondimprov.com. And I can help us move forward either with team training, coaching for your people. A brand new thing that I've been offering is for companies to buy a package of coaching sessions that people can opt into. I no longer heretofore am doing the thing where a boss can force somebody else into a coaching program. That doesn't feel good for either of us. But I do think that it's very important for people to have the opportunity to reach out to someone when they know that confrontation is on the horizon with their peers. And as we're trying to raise the bar, let's raise the level of support also. And so just making it available to people to be able to have someone to hash through some of these details with, maybe work through some of their feelings after receiving difficult feedback. All of that is what I love so much to do with my clients. And so I've recently made it available that someone can choose to buy a package of sessions to make available on an optional basis for their team.
Now, Andrea, this has been such a great conversation. I'm hoping that all the listeners got this and can keep this too tight to them. Conversations have to be had. Some of them are tougher than others. But the real test, the real test, if I got anything out of here, is how am I ready for those? How am I ready for that? You know, when we get on that stage, that proverbial stage, whether it's at work or just your home life, how are you ready for those conversations? Because it really does matter. Thank you so much for sharing this time, this theme that we were speaking about. And I wish you all the best. Folks, we're going to have all the links you need to get a hold of Andrea and her work. And I just ask that you follow those through, and we'll have them as part of the show notes and videos. As a reminder, today's episode is sponsored by Fantail Services and Superpass, which are powering our website and app, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, The Outlier Project, and Duco. If you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment right now. And we're always looking for new ideas and guests that can add to our show. So if you know someone or have a topic that you would like featured on the podcast or want to sponsor our show, we love to hear about it by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.